Collecting data is our focus for today, and after we identify the problem, and the next step, of course, is to collect data. Basically today what I'm going to give you is a general idea about the concept of collecting data and the purpose of collecting data, and what are the major focuses that we need to pay attention when we collect data. So this is not a detailed plan for yourself to conduct your data collection for your graduation paper. Instead, it only provides you a general survey of the scope for data collection. That's it. So basically, let's try to identify the lesson goals for this week. The first one, we will learn the rationale of collecting data. And also, you will be able to understand a little bit more about survey, interview, observation, and document review. Okay? So basically, this is what we're going to cover for today. Let's talk about data collection. We always emphasize on the three pillars of a research: problem definition, and data collection, and also the last part is data analysis. So this is one of the three pillars. It is required. So here we say it is an important aspect of any type of research study. That is true. Remember, when you do a research, you need to have data. So normally, we are not a philosopher. We are not a philosopher sitting there and thinking about the future or life. Most of the scholars, most of the philosophers, when they debate or exchange dialogue with other philosophers, they can just reason, they can just think, they can just use their induction and deduction to come out to support their own arguments. However, when we do research, we need to have the solid evidences from your data. It's very important. That's why most of the study, most of the scientific research do not focus on the study for future. Why is that? And at best, we can predict a bit about what will happen in the future. But what we have is the data already happened out there. So the data must be there. So imagine this: if we collect data from the past and use the data from the past and with the analysis on the past data, and we use it and use the findings of the data to forecast, to predict what happened in the future. That would be kind of dangerous. We call this is extrapolation. Extrapolation means pole, means that there's a pole up there, right? So extrapolation means that you extend your findings to predict something very far away. And most likely, this kind of prediction will be not correct. This kind of prediction is not correct. So most likely, when we conduct research, we use data from the past, and we examine what happened in the past, and try to come out some of the theory, some of the understanding about what happened in the past. So at best, we can use our findings to predict a little bit more about the near future. That's it. When we predict the future, this is not our purpose though. Our purpose is to understand what happened in the past. So be careful about the difference between prediction and analysis. That's a little bit different, okay? So you need to collect data, right? So remember one thing, we need to make sure that the data collections is accurate. It's very important because inaccurate data collection can impact the results of a study and ultimately lead to invalid results. So be careful for this one. And I believe that you should understand at this point, when we do research, we are moving one step at a time. So basically, it's something like this. We move from A we move from A to B, and we move to C, and we move to D, and eventually we may move to Z, right? So every move ahead, every step has to be valid. Every step has to be valid. It's very important. So validity, valid. The definition for validity is that you are doing what you are supposed to do. It's very important. If you are collecting data, then the data you have collected are supposed to answer the questions you want to answer. Okay? So you have to make sure that all the process, all the different steps, all the linkage are logical and validity. So if you make sure that this is valid, and valid, then of course, you start from A and you end with Z, then you will have a valid results for your study, is that right? Okay? So suppose that we are now in the process of data collection. But the data collection here, the data is not capable for us to answer our research questions. Then you have an invalid data. So the link just severed here. So you can see that you start with A and hoping that you can validly end at Z. But here is the block you just split. So overall, your research will be not valid. It's very important because when we evaluate your graduation papers, at least for myself, I will try to understand, try to explore whether your logical link between each steps is valid or not. It's very important. Once I identify there is a breakage over here, then it cannot be possible for you to have a valid research. Is that right? So you have to make sure that at each step is valid. It's very important because this is the minimum requirement for successful research. Okay? So here, when we talk about data collection, also it's very important, of course, because inaccurate data collection can impact the results. Okay? So data collections, there are many different ways for data collections. For the primary data, we can have observation, we can have survey, we can have interview, right? But for secondary data, basically there are two forms of data, primary and secondary. Primary, it will be very easy for us to understand first about secondary data. Secondary data are anything already existing in this whole wide world. Like a paper, the words on the paper, articles, news articles, video tapes, records, anything, or meeting minutes, anything that's already existing there, then they are secondary data. So the only task you need to collect this kind of data is to retrieve it from the archive. Very simple, is that right? But how about primary data? Primary data are something that you have to investigate by yourself. So the process of investigation, you need to have some tools. So basically you will use a questionnaire, you will use an interview schedule, or you are going to use an observation table so that you can collect data through observation, survey, or interview. Because you need to investigate the data by yourself. So they are primary data. So basically, there are many different forms of data collections. You can start from the quantitative approach, and to the other end is qualitative approach. So quantitative methods of data collection, most likely with survey or face-to-face interview. And how about qualitative data? Qualitative can include in-depth interview, can include observation, can include the documentary analysis and so on. So there are many different kinds. But for now, let's move to the next slide. So basically, we will divide the slides into two major parts. The first part is about quantitative data collection methods. And the second part is about qualitative data collection methods. So basically, there are two ways. But now, it's very important for us to clarify what is the difference between data collection and research methods. I have been often asked by students, if I conduct a case study, then what kind of ways for data collection I need to take? Well, if you are conducting a case study, basically, the idea of a case study is you have a case. For example, if you want to study a marketing strategy of a company XYZ, then you are trying to study their marketing strategy, right? So ideally, you have to collect all relative information related to XYZ company XYZ's marketing strategy. So maybe you want to get into the company to observation you are required, right? And maybe you want to interview the CEOs or CFOs or the managers in the company. So observation, and now we have an interview. And now you may find out that it's necessary for you to conduct a large-scale survey for all the employees and their customers. Is that right? So you may need to have a survey. So you need to design questionnaires. And not only that, you may find out it's necessary for you to collect data from their company. That is, their memos, contracts, minutes, documents, or the information from official website, right? So imagine this. If you say you are conducting a case study, actually, you need to collect all related data related to this case. Is that right? So your methods of data collections will be very different. You can use observation, you can use interview, you can use survey, you can just retrieve the documents, right? But a comprehensive case study should include all the different methods. See the difference between these two, okay? So when we say that research methods is an approach for you to conduct a research, but now we focus on the ways for data collections. Okay, so these are the primary tools for you to collect data. They can be used with different research methods. We have so many different kinds of research methods. For example, case study, right? Narrative analysis, ethnographic study, or grounded theory, or Delphi method, or focus group discussion, and so on. There are so many. But you name it, they are just with different names and with different functions. However, when you decide to take one certain research method to take care of your graduate paper, remember, your data collection may just simply focus on these 4 different kinds. Sometimes you will only use one approach, one method for you to collect data. Sometimes you may need to have multiple methods of data collections, like a case study. Is that right? Okay, so be careful for this one, just before we start to talk about this. Now, we will start from the quantitative data collection methods, from here. Well, basically, quantitative data collection methods, you can look at this. Basically, they are, when you say quantitative data, the data should have a large number. The sample size should be large enough, right? Okay? The large sample, we say that sample size. Sample size, as you could remember, that the N denotes the sample size, and the N denotes the population, right? This is population, this is sample, and sample size. Okay, normally, how can we define a large sample? Well, in social studies, the large sample, there is a very, very crude criteria for this. Normally, a large sample, when we have 35 sampling units in the sample is sufficient to conduct a very, very basic data analysis. I mean, very basic data analysis. For example, compare the difference between gender, right? That would be good enough. But if you want to conduct a more complicated research analysis, for example, not only compare the differences between gender, we also want to compare the differences between departments. How many departments we have? 12, supposedly, right? So imagine this. If we have a 12, then 35 will not be enough. Is that right? Because it is far from sufficient number. If you divide 35 into 30 divided by 12, then each group at most could have 3 or 2, right? And it would be very difficult for you to have a significant statistical analysis out of this. So basically, when we decide the sufficient number for our statistical analysis, it's very simple, very simple. Most likely, you make sure that in each of the subcategory, you should have at least 5 sampling units out there. So look here. If we want to compare, we want to compare the differences between departments, so how many sampling units we need to have at least? I say 5, right? So very simple. Times 5 equals 60. Is that right? Very simple. Simple. That is, we have to select. We have to select sample into each subcategory. Of course, we can use stratified random sampling strategy. When you need it, you will study more about how to conduct stratified random sampling to make sure that each category, each subcategory have at least 5 sampling units out there. Very simple. Because if you have 5, then it will be sufficient for you to conduct statistical analysis for comparison. Is that right? Now, let's move on a little bit more. Not only compare the differences between departments, among departments, but also compare further, try to understand what are the difference between different genders in different departments. So look here, in terms of gender, we have 2 different gender, right? So how many samples we need here right now? What is the sample size we need? Of course, 60 and times 2. So at least we need to have 120. Is that right? Okay. And more, if you want to go further to explore the difference between departments and gender, and also the different residence areas in Taiwan. Suppose we have 4 different regions, okay, areas. Then you have to times 4. So that would be 420, 480. So this is a very brief idea for you to select the necessary sample size for yourself. Okay, but basically, if you conduct quantitative research, you need to have a large size of sample, basically, okay? But in next semester, if you select statistical analysis, then you will be able to learn more from Professor Wu Shaoci. Okay, let's take a look at this one. So quantitative data collection methods basically rely on random sampling. Basically, this is the ideal for social studies. But for most of the studies conducted by students and even by scholars, when random sampling is not possible, if in the case of that random sampling is not possible, then you need to have an ad hoc approach for you to take, right? Then you have to explain why you want to take a certain approach of non-random sampling strategy. You have to explain. Remember, it is your responsibility to explain your strategy to the readers, to the reviewers. Okay, it's very important. So rely on random sampling strategy, but the next part is structured data collection. Structured. The definition of structured is that every item in your questionnaire, every item in your interview schedule is fixed, is structured. But here comes a very important idea. The presumption for you to conduct a quantitative data analysis, quantitative research, there is a very important assumption for this one. That is, for the topic you want to study, there already exists a plentiful of literature related to your study already. So basically, you can imagine this. This is your study, right? If you want to conduct quantitative study, quantitative research, then all the research instrument needs to be structured. Right? Because you have to design questions, and those questions, then you have to ask, where do those questions come from? They come from the evidences from your literature review. Is that right? So basically, there should be a lot of literature, a lot of studies related to the study issue of your graduation paper. Must be related. So that's why you can read a lot. So use their findings, use the prior knowledge to establish your structured survey form, structured interview schedule, structured. When you say that structured, everything is fixed. And to fix all the research instruments, you need to have the evidences from the literature. That's a requirement. Or otherwise, it is very difficult for you to have a structured research instrument, right? It will be very difficult. This is very different from qualitative research. When we conduct quantitative research, we already have a lot of studies or a lot of previous studies related to the study issue of your graduation paper already. So that's why we can review the literature. We can study how they have conducted the research so that we can apply their theory. We can apply their research methods, right? Structured. But how about qualitative research? Qualitative research is more or less unstructured. Most likely, the purpose for all kinds of qualitative research is to explore, is to describe the variable itself, is to describe the happening itself, or the phenomenon, or to explore something that few other scholars have explored before. So most likely, why you want to conduct qualitative research? There's a very good assumption for this, because not so many people already know about the study issue you want to do. That's why you want to explore, want to conduct quantitative research, right? For example, in this case, although it's ridiculous, but let's assume it is true. Again, there's a small village just beside the fence of the Wenzhou, right? There lived 100 or so of people. The average height of those people is just 150. And they look pale over it, and their hairs are brown, unlike us. But strange enough, they speak Chinese, they speak Mandarin, right? If we really can identify such a small group of village, right? It's happening just over there. Can you imagine that? How many scholars out there have ever paid attention to them before? Maybe none, right? So you may be the first one to conduct ethnographic research about them. So you have to be there. So basically, do we have literature for you to review? Some, not many, right? And with the little literature available for you to review what they are and how they perform their daily functions. So the basic idea is that you learn some general principle from the literature. But with this kind of general principles, it's not possible for you to establish a structured research instrument. So qualitative research most likely is unstructured. You just try to open adult and the next adult to see what happened. And throughout the way, they collect a lot of unstructured data with interview, with observations, and with a lot of different methods, trying to collect their documents inside them. Maybe they have journals or diaries, or maybe there's a family records out there you can collect, right? So documents. So you use many different ways, one step at a time, unstructured. It's very important. So quantitative research can be structured because there should be a lot of literature available for you to review. But qualitative, unlikely, most likely, right? Okay, but what I say here is two extremes. But most of the studies are somewhere in between, So don't rely on, so basically I will appreciate more a student is taking a mixed approach. Why we need to have a mixed approach for data collection? Well, basically, just like if you look at the cell phone from one side, then all of your observation will be only this side, right? So we need to have a triangulate. Triangulation is very important. To provide a more objective observation about what is the reality is very important. Of course, reality is always different from your description of the reality. It's always different. There's no complete match at all. When you try to understand the social phenomenon, this reality here, right? Every different scholar look at the same social phenomenon. They study it. They collect data from it. They analyze the data they collect. So with their effort, they describe what happened, the real social phenomenon up there, right? But the real social phenomenon there can never be described fully by any scholars out there. Cannot. But at least we can try to approximate our findings to the reality, right? Then how can you approximate your findings to the reality? How? Triangulation. You use multiple sources of data collections. You use multiple sources of the research methods, trying to identify what happened, at least what happened, may happen in there. So it would be better for you to avoid one-sided observation at all. Well, but most of the students will just take one approach, most likely. But try to do that. Try to advance yourself a little bit, okay? And quantitative data analysis, when we collect quantitative data, basically those results are much easier to summarize, to compare, to generalize. Why is that? Let's look at the rationale of sampling one more time. We have a population here, right? This is population. And throughout the sampling strategy, we will have a smaller sample here. Is that right? This is population, and this is sample. So all our effort here is to collect data from the sample. So we have a sample, we have all the statistical analysis here, right? And we use the statistics here to estimate the parameter of the population. So basically, our efforts for data collections is only here. We select sample from the population, smaller one, because it's impractical for us to survey all the sampling units in the population. It's difficult, and a lot of time impossible. So we select a smaller sample size, and we collect all the data from the sample. Then we have the statistic with the sample. Then with the sample statistic, we estimate what happened in the population. So basically the keywords here is estimate. Not precise, estimate, right? But this is a very standardized process. So look here, these kind of results are very easy for us to summarize, to compare, and to generalize. We generalize the sample statistics to the population. That's it. Very simple, right? Okay, that's why don't underestimate the amount of energy and time you will need to spend on a qualitative research. Qualitative research does take time, take a lot of writings. Really, if you want to have a decent qualitative research. But in comparison, quantitative research is much easier to write. At least for me, I always believe that quantitative research. The only thing you need to know is to collect data and add coding to numbers and run a very fancy process with the SPSS, come out with the result. You identify whether there is a significant difference or not, and tell your readers, oh, I found that there's something wrong or something significant over there. Most likely, the process is, I would say, it's more mechanic, without artistic value over there. Without artistic, you don't need to be an artist to write a quantitative research. But in terms of qualitative report, most likely you have to be a good writer and a very high sense, acute sense of arts, because you are going to tell the story. You are going to write it out, right? You want to write a story that is attractive to your readers. So imagine this. So once you decide, if you want to focus on qualitative research, fine, and you need to practice a lot of writing. Okay, write it out, because eventually you need to write it out, right? But if you are conducting quantitative research, then you need to learn SPSS. You need to how to hit the button of each of the icon under the SPSS program, and you need to understand how to explain the outputs, and what are the major components that you need to focus on each of the tests, and you just say it out. And the process is very, very mechanical. I would say very mechanical. There's no mystery. Just click, output, explain, hey, my story, that's it. But qualitative research is totally different. You have to look at the data by yourself. And you have to sense the story that the data want you to tell your readers. So you have to retell the stories of the data. So to some extent, you are artistic storyteller in this regard. Okay, so if you want to become a good storyteller, then you need to write it out, because there's no room for you to speak in terms of academic writing, right? You have to write it out. Okay, let's continue to this one. So typical quantitative data gathering strategy, we have, these are just several of the examples when you consider to use quantitative data. If you have experiments, experiments or clinical trials, it's applied for medical science. Or if you want to observe or recording well-defined events, here is a key, well-defined events. That is, the event is well-defined, already there, is structured. If it is not structured, it's not possible for you to do that, right? So well-defined, for example, counting the number of patients, that's a good voice. Okay, number of patients waiting in emergency at specified times of the day. For example, if you want to observe, for example, if you are the manager for one hospital, and for your ER, emergency room, you want to know whether you need to expand the capacity, receiving a capacity of the ER room, right? So you need to count the number of patients. So this is a well-defined event. The only purpose for you is to observe and count the number. That's it. And it's number, quantitative data. Or obtaining relevant data from management information systems. Big data, or there's a lot of ways for use computer to manage all this. Or administering surveys with close-end questions. When we design our survey questionnaires, we have two forms of the questions. One is close-ended. The other one is open-ended. Close-ended, you provide a set of answers. And all the answers must meet a very important criteria. That is, they need to be mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive. But in the meantime, complete comprehensive answers for the scenario of the questions. So each of the questions has to be exclusive, mutually exclusive. They cannot be overlapping. For example, if I ask you how old are you, I provide you an answer somewhere between under 20 and 20 to 25, and the next one is 25 to 30. Did you see the overlapping of the second and third answers? 20 to 25, 25 to 30. Then you are amazed to find out if you happen to be 25, what would be the choice for you, right? And also, all the answers should be comprehensive. Comprehensive and mutually exclusive. That is, I need to provide a set of answers that should cover all the possibilities of the answers out there. So if I ask which grade you are, I give you first grade, first year, second year, third year, and fourth year, right? Okay. If I only give you 1, 2, 3, what? Then how about if you are the fourth year student? What happened to that? You have no choice, right? So this is not comprehensive. So you need to have the close-ended questions, which means you need to have a structure it. You need to structure it in a certain way. And how can you structure it? You need to have the evidences from the literature. Okay. So basically, it doesn't matter whether you are conducting a survey with questionnaire or interview throughout your interview. If you want to use the close-ended questions, basically, you need to have a large number of, plenty number of literature available for you to develop such a research instrument. Okay, and we can move on to the next one, interviews. Interviews with closed-end questions are quantitative way for data collections. Interviews with open-ended questions are qualitative research, are qualitative way of data collection. Be careful for this. For example, face-to-face interviews. Instead of sending out this questionnaire to you, I approach you and ask you, okay, what is your age? And you could please choose a range of them. Okay, what is your salary? What is your job category, right? Basically, it's very similar. It's very similar to survey. But the way of deliver the data collection is with human being. That's it. Very different. Not too much different. All the answers there are close-ended. So that's why we can collect quantitative data. Just like someone standing on the corner of one street, right? I say, hey, mister, would you please help us to fill out the form, right? Fill out the form. This is a kind of face-to-face interview. Of course, you can use telephone. You can use telephone. Most likely for most of the insurance company, they will use telephone interviews to double check whether you are the person who applied for the insurance policy or not. And they will ask you your ID number, the date of birth, maybe your mother's maiden name. In the United States, most of the time, use telephone interview. Okay? And maybe you can use computer-assisted personal interviewing. This is more advanced, but nowadays we are going to do. Now we have a lot of social media, right? Social media like Line or Instagram or Facebook or even Google Mail can use for meeting purpose. So basically, there are many different ways for you to deliver this data collection. So interviews, but remember, again, when we say we are conducting interviews, if we are interview our respondents with closed-end questions, most likely we are collecting quantitative data. If the interview schedule is full of open-ended questions, then most likely it should be qualitative data, qualitative research. Okay, be careful of that. With the same name but a different context, they are different. Okay, so interviews. And how about the other one? Questionnaires. Questionnaires, there are many different kind of questionnaires. We have paper pencil questionnaires and web-based questionnaires. Nowadays, most of the students will take this web-based questionnaires. But these two different ways of data collections, when you decide to take either of them or both of them, you have to consider your sampling strategy. You have to consider the selection bias of your sampling. For example, if you are using online survey, it's so convenient. It does not cost you a dime, most likely, right? You just send it out and to whom you have no idea about who he really is. And suddenly you have something back. And you will be happy to collect all the data, use the data to produce the final analysis. You can see there are a lot of obscurity out there, right? How can you make sure that you can exclude this? Well, basically, I always advise the student to take two different approaches. One, that you can use web-based questionnaires to distribute your questions, your survey. And in the meantime, you should prepare paper pencil questionnaires. You should prepare a hard copy in the meantime to send out to another group of people. So basically, all your data will come from two different sources. One is paper, the other one is online survey, with the same questions. So eventually you can compare a little. It's a safeguard ways for you to check whether your data collection is good enough or not. Well, this is not ideal, of course. This is not ideal, of course. But at least it can take away some of the selection bias from the web-based questionnaires. So once you have the two different data sources, right, you can compare whether they are about the same. The results of these two sets of questionnaires should be alike. If they are not alike, you have to be very careful about your interpretation of the data analysis. At least you provide something, okay? But not only based on questionnaires. I would also advise students to do one extra effort. That is, once you have the survey findings, and use the findings as the basic for you to conduct another round of interview, in-depth interview. You use the findings from the survey and to design a small list of the questions that you need more clarification from the experts. So you use the questions to ask the experts how you think about this. So basically, look here. You diversify your data sources. One, questionnaires. You have two different forms of questionnaires, right? And also, data source. You have survey, and also you have an interview from different people looking at the same thing. Again, it's a matter of triangulation. It's very important, triangulate. You have to try all the possible means to triangulate your data sources. Triangulate your perspective of interpretation. So this is the best way for us to produce a description of the reality closer to the reality itself. If you rely on only one data source, well, it will automatically shut out yourself from the rank of the good researcher. Indeed, it is true. It is the real life. So you have to triangulate. The higher of your academic level, the more triangulation you need, you will require to perform in your research. Okay? Okay, any question? So it is two. But basically, it doesn't matter whether you conduct a paper or online survey. You have to make sure, try your best to make sure that your selection of the sampling units is reasonable. is reasonable enough. It's reasonable. It's very important. You have to make sure, you have to describe. For example, if you want to survey those online shoppers, how they look at, how they perform their shopping behaviors and so on, online shoppers, right? Okay, so you have no idea about, when you send out the online survey to the online shoppers, you really have no idea about who will receive this and who is going to take it, right? So you have to describe what would be the way for you to check, what is the way for you to check the validity of the respondents. They are online shoppers. You have to make sure about this. Sometimes you design the questions in your surveys, sometimes. Or sometimes you describe, this is the website for online shoppers only. Okay, fine, right? Then they are online shoppers. And you don't want to send to a night chat website that's for grandpa and grandmas only, right? So you have to describe. You have to try all your best ways, best efforts to describe how I try to make sure that the data I collect is the data I really want to collect. The source identification is very important, okay? So you have to describe this. And questionnaires, when you design your question, because there are some other much more profound techniques you need to learn in next semester, how to design a questionnaire. You need to do that, because designing a questionnaire needs a lot of understanding about the span of a person's patience, how many minutes they want to spend on it, and the way of your design, how to design a straightforward question that with plain English or plain Chinese that everyone looks at that can read at the same meaning as you perceive. Sometimes there are a lot of issues out there, but basically, we can use checklist, we can rating scales. Checklist or rating scale. And when you have, for example, a rating scale, if you want to identify a behavior, attitude, preferences, likelihood, your attitude scale may be good enough, right? If you want to identify demographic information, your job category, your age, your income, and so on, your educational background, and so on, right? A checklist may be good enough. So basically, however, still remember the way for us to construct a research instrument. How to construct a research instrument? Yeah, thank you. That's very, very basic, very fundamental. Last time I gave you a handout, right? Do you still have that one? Please take it out. Take a look. The handout, it will be very important, very useful when it is a time for you to really want to design your research instrument. You have to make sure that following the process of operationalization, start with the concept of the study issue. After a careful literature review, produce a set of comprehensive indicators that they are capable of reflecting the idea, the concept of the study issue. So you have to put the indicators into the major construct of your research instrument. It doesn't matter what kind of research instrument you have. Basically, you have to make sure that you have the contents of the indicators in your research instrument. And also you have the major contents that can represent your study population inside your research instrument. Okay, use that. So whenever in the next semester when you try to construct your research instrument, if you are taking qualitative research, I believe that we should be able to talk more about this. And if you have any personal inquiry, you can come to me. Let's take a 10 minutes break. And we finish quantitative data collection is structured. Basically, you can use interview or survey to accomplish these ends. But how about qualitative data collection methods? Qualitative data collections, more likely they are open-ended and with less structured protocols. It will be a little bit difficult for you to produce a completely structured protocol for you to collect data in qualitative research. The reason is very simple, because qualitative research by its very definition is that we full of exploration of new things, right? Full of investigation that not too many people knew about before. So we can understand, because the literature is less sparse and not sufficient for you to produce a structure for your data analysis or data collection. So most likely, most qualitative research, they are always open-ended and less structured. So basically, they rely on interactive interviews. Respondents may have maybe interviewed several times and maybe several times. And most likely, we will use triangulation to increase the credibility of their findings. Credibility is the ability to be trusted. Okay, so in qualitative research, we have different requirements, different terms, different jargons, because the paradigm is different too, right? Different emphasis. And triangulation also applies here. So that is very important for you to have multiple sources for data. And be careful for this. Findings not generalizable to any specific population. Why is that? Very simple. In qualitative research, we have a sample. And then we collect the data from the sample directly. That's it. So you can see that we collected just the record. So basically, our effort is to describe what happened in the sample. Describe the variation, the happenings, the phenomena, the situation, and try to explore a little bit more understanding about what happened in this over here. What happened over there? That's it. So we describe. We do not have the intention to generalize the findings from the sample to any population. Most likely we don't. But be careful for this one. We have no idea here what is the population that is related to the blue sample here. Basically, we have no idea, right? We have no idea. But in our qualitative report, most likely we will include a discussion here, trying to use what happened, what we have found from here. We have found from here, right? Trying to say something about the population that may be useful for us to apply. But remember, this kind of discussion is very, very little, not too much. That is never the focus of qualitative research. Never. Okay? But how can you estimate the population parameter from your qualitative research? Well, since we do not, remember, we did not select a sample from here, right? We don't. There's a average here. We are broken. There's no link here. So how can we make the estimation work? Well, literature. We have to count on literature to describe. So after we have the findings of the study, then we identify the meanings of the findings. How can you compare? How can you identify the meanings of the findings? Look here, let me give you a very simple process. Now we have findings here, right? Now we have findings. Findings of the sample. But as we know already, findings themselves cannot be used to answer our research purpose. No, right? So basically, we need to identify the meanings of findings, right? So in chapter 4, we should have a list of major findings out there. In chapter 5, conclusion, first we discuss the meanings of the findings. How can we have the meanings of the findings? We compare the findings with another set of literature. Another set of literature. And the evidence from another set of literature will take the role as a decision levels for us to compare. So basically, you compare the findings. You have the finding here, right? You compare with another literature. And those literature may sometimes come from the general population, right? So we use this kind of comparison, try to understand what may happen in the general population. So remember, it's very important for us to keep in mind. By the end of the chapter, in the beginning of the chapter 5, you need, chapter 5, the grand title for chapter 5 is conclusion. In conclusion chapter, we need to provide discussion first. Discuss what? Discussing the meanings of the findings first. Okay, it's very important. And once you have finished discussions, you have produced the meanings for the findings, right? Then you use meanings of the findings to answer your research purpose. To talk about you. So basically, we do not use findings to talk about research purpose. Just as I use this for many times, how smart you are, right? You got an average of 120. I cannot say use 120 to say you are very smart. I have to discuss the meaning of 120 by comparing 120 to the average of the whole population and the standard deviation, and identify your percentile of your ranking among all the population, right? So with the ranking meaning, I know, wow, you are incredibly smart. 98% of population is under you. That's great, right? So this is the meaning. So remember, you always use the meanings of the findings to identify your research purpose, not your findings. Be careful for this one, okay? This applies to both qualitative and quantitative research. They all need the meanings of the finding. Okay? Okay, let's move on to different ways of data collection for qualitative research. The first one is in-depth interview. In-depth interview normally takes time. You have to sit with the interviewee and exchange a lot of small talks in the beginning, ask him to sign on the consent form, and to orientate him about the process of the interview, and then move on to the main questions of the interview protocol. Those questions most likely are open-ended. That's why you want to have an in-depth interview, right? And the format is semi-structured. It's the best, you will have a list of questions, open-ended, and you have no idea about the length of the time that the interview may take. You have no idea. Well, you can estimate, but you cannot control the timing specifically. Very difficult. And basically, why you want to have an in-depth interview, your purpose most likely is trying to seek understanding and interpretation from the interviewee. How they think about something, what is their understanding about the phenomenon, and so on. So basically, you need to record and transcribe all of the answers out there, okay? And there is a software available for you to transcribe the recordings. Previously, you have to do this by your hands, but now there are a lot of computer softwares available for this purpose. They are free and they are very efficient. If you want to use your hands, it will take you about 1 day to transcribe about 30 minutes of the interview. But now, it's just one click away. The software program is PY Transcriber. Now you can use your cell phone to check it out. I knew that it was available for PC and for MacBook. PY Transcriber. Okay, PY Transcribe is very useful and you can use it. You can just download it and use your PC or MacBook to run the trick. Of course, you can have a trial run at home today, maybe, and you interview yourself. How you feel about research methodology? How you think about your graduation project? And try to use different language. Mandarin, Chinese, Mandarin or English, or maybe you can use Taiwanese to see whether it is workable or not. Malay, maybe, I have no idea. But the engine that drives this program is from Google, so that should be very, very powerful. I have used that one several times, and that is a very, very decent program. Okay, so test it. So this is in-depth interview, a tool for you that you can use PY Transcriber. Okay, and when you really decide to have an in-depth interview, then you have to train yourself to become a good interviewer, right? So there are some skills and attributes you need to pay attention to. Of course, this is very general principles. You need to be open-minded, welcoming all the inputs from the respondents, right? You should not have prejudice. You should not have a preset mindset of there, hey, you have to say something like I want you to say. No, or otherwise you can design your own question. And also, you have to be flexible and responsive. How can you follow up the interview process smoothly? One of the skills you may want to apply is to listen carefully and try to repeat or emphasize some of the keywords that the interviewee has expressed to you. For example, if you interview a question about what is your educational process, what is your learning experience while you stay at Wenzhou, and the interviewee may say, oh, that's in overall it's great. But I know there was a professor, Daniel, is that right? Not so present in getting along. Then you can follow with, you mentioned Daniel, right? Okay, how about he? Follow up with the keywords. This is a way for you to stimulate another round of talk. Okay, sometimes it's very useful. One, it indicates your interviewee that you are listening. You are really hearing what he said, right? It's very important. And the second one, it provides another round of momentum for the interviewee to speak freely for the next round, okay? So this is flexible and responsive. And patient, okay? You have to wait out all the talks from the interview. Don't try to interrupt. Don't try to interrupt. Most people with strong personality would like to dominate the conversation. Don't do this. Your role in this interview is the facilitator. The purpose of facilitator is to facilitate the talk from the interview and make sure that the process of the interview is smooth, right? Facilitate. And observant, that is, you have to be careful about the body language. Body language of the respondents, they are very important, okay? So when someone, for example, I really hate that guy, Daniel, I really hate. But you look at him, his face is not hating at all, right? So when he said this, may have some other meaning. So you have to be observant. Be very careful about the different. Normally, when we talk about communication, There are two ways: language and body language, verbal language and body language. And most of the communication meanings are communicated with body language. It's very important. So you have to be careful. Not only listening, not only recording, but you have to also observing the cues that the respondents try to express to you, intentionally or unintentionally. Most of the body language are unconscious. Most of the body languages, okay? And you have to be a good listener. And listen. Most likely, when we are interviewed, we will do about 20% of talk and leave 80% of the time to the interviewee and let him talk. So you just don't talk, because your information is not important in this case, right? You want his information, you want his idea, you want his statement instead of yourself, right? So don't talk too much. If you really want to talk, you are only trying to facilitate the talk. That'll be good. And try to show your empathy, try to be listening, and that's it. Okay? A lot of skills. And basically, empathy, 同理心, is very important. Okay? And there are some process for you to conduct an in-depth interview. Of course, let me emphasize one more time, when it is up to you to do this, you need to read more literature. But the general process is like this. First, systematizing. Trying to come out the thing you want to ask. Construct the things you want to ask. And put the things into a research instrument. So you have to design your interview protocol, right? In the interview protocol, basically there's a face sheet, the interview questions, and the post-interview comment sheet, and so on. So beginning, introduction, and the body of the questions, the ending with some of the administration stuffs. Say thank you, and say the double check, and so on. So basically, it's very simple. It's just like any other kind of research instrument. You have to inform your subjects about the purpose of the study. How are you going to use the data? How are you going to secure the the confidential issue of the data? Okay, and express gratitude, and so on, introduction. And provide the main body of the questions. And by the end, say thank you, and also double check, and so on. So once you have the research tool, interview protocol, then you can continue, you can contact the interviewee and start to interview. After you have the interview data, you have the recording, you need to transcribe instantly. Remember, you have to transcribe it as soon as possible. Don't leave it 1 week later. Why? Because once you transcribe it 1 week later, the emotion, the gestures, the feeling of that interview will just disappear. You have no idea about what really happened at that time, right? So you have to do this right after this, if possible, on site, but it's not possible. But don't do it in the next day. And you still have a very strong feeling, the interaction, because even you have the software to run the transcript for you, right? It will produce a list of 9s for each talk, 9 every talk, 9 only 9s. But I believe that you would like to make some correction. Maybe there are something not so clear, right? You want to clear, and maybe there are some body language you want to make an emphasize. You want to take notes about that. So you need to have this kind of fresh memory. So you have to do it as soon as possible. So once you finish, put an additional necessary notes by the talk, by the statement, then you understand the meaning of the statement more clearly, right? So after you finish one interview, record it, transcribe it in the same day, when your family memory is still fresh. Okay, it's very important. And analyzing, verifying, and reporting, there are another process for editing, coding, and data analysis, and write it out. It's a general process. It's okay. because eventually you will learn it. Okay, this is a very simple process. And let's move on, observation methods. Observation, we say that we watch. Basically, we just watch. We observe, watch. Keep an eye on you, watch, right? Behaviors, events, or noting physical characteristics in their natural setting. Most likely, it's in their natural setting. We just observe, watch. And the way of watching their behaviors, observing their behavior, they are basically, it can be overt or covert. Overt means obvious. You open your identity, you participate. Or secret, right? Covert. Or direct, you just express, I'm the observer for this one, or indirect. Through the second, through other people to help you out, or standing out just like a bystanders, indirect. So there are many, many different forms of observations. But when you observe, be careful of the Hawthorne effect. Anyone here still remember Hawthorne effect? Any?
I think then the people react in a different way. So kind of influence.
People will react different in a different ways when they know they are observed.
Demand characteristics.
Hmm?
Your exhibit demand characteristics.
Yeah, they will exhibit behavior very different from their normal patterns. And this is the experiment findings come out from the Hawthorne factories. After World War II, in Hawthorne factory, the workers there have been observed, whether observe the relationship between the work efficiency and the light level percentage, right? Okay, so it's kind of interesting. So observation can be skewed. The result of observation can be skewed. Nowadays, we are here, right? No one observes us, so we are performing quite naturally in our natural way, normal pattern. But if we know there's one guy standing there and taking an observation table, taking a checklist, right? Strange. Just like you, if you are riding a motorcycle, right? And passing through the crossroad, and notice there's a policeman there, what would you do? You know you are observed, right? You will obey all the traffic lights. You know you are observed, so you will obey. But you know there's no police there. Your reaction may be somewhat different, right? Oh, it's all right to take a right hand in the red light. Maybe it's okay, right? But I am quite sure if there's a police standing on the corner, you won't do that. At least I won't do that, right? Okay, I'm not a very good driver to obey all the traffic laws. When I lived in Taipei, I follow all the regulations. When I live in Kaohsiung, all the traffic lights become reference points only for me to reference. Oh, I should stop here. Oh, okay. No police. I can turn right. Even I drive. Oh, not bad. But this is the way of life. There are many different lifestyles, many different lifestyles in Taipei and here. Really, you will observe. One of the very differences that I can sense is that I would wear my sneakers and short pants and a very casual clothing to stroll through all the department stores in Kaohsiung. But in Taipei, I would just wear a little bit formal, at least waist mask. So it's different. It's different. Kind of casual style. Life, right? Enjoy. Okay, let's move on. Timing of using observation. Basically, if there's a process going on over there, we try to understand what's happening over there. It will be very difficult to interview, say, hey, what do you think about the process? Instead of asking, why don't you just go there to observe by yourself? So if you want to observe the process of some situations, you just go observe, right? One of my advisor in my doctoral program, Dr. Louise Comfort, she is an expert in crisis management. So whenever there is a crisis in some corner of the world, she would fly herself to that point to observe. to observe. Why? Because she insisted upon about the value of observation. Instead of making a phone call to say, hey, how you feel about the earthquake? Why don't you just go there? So sometimes, if you really want to understand what happened in the situation, throughout the process, you need to go there to observe. So this is a very good timing for you to observe, right? Okay. And gathering data on the individual behaviors or interactions among people. And just like you, look at yourself. Now some of the students here are playing around the cell phone. Suddenly you stopped. You know you observed, so you change your behavior, your pattern. That's why I observe, right? So I can observe which student is paying attention to me. Your eyes were fixed at me, so I will look at you. Is that right? Okay. So I look at you. So it's kind of interesting. You know, social studies are full of wonders. And most of all, you have to be curious about it. Your curiosity, not only kill cat, can drive you upward, advance yourself. If you are curious enough, you will find out there are so many things out there that just need you to explore. Why students don't pay attention to my class? Why YMC is coming to the office today? He has no class scheduled for today, but he is in the office. Right? There are so many issues out there. Okay, why my dog always wake up later than me? Really, dogs are supposed to get up earlier, right? And nowadays, my two dogs, they always wait me to finish all the morning chores and wake up. They say, hey, I'm still here. So strange, right? That is my dog. There must be something there. It's too cozy, too cold, so that they are just like human beings, don't want to wake up early. Really, every day, because the two dogs just lie on the bedside of me, on our bed. And both of them always wake up later than me. So strange. They are not dogs. They are babies. So strange. So there are a lot of things out there for you to nurture, to increase your curiosity. Things happen. Things happen in a very strange way. So you can just observe. Okay? If you need to know about physical setting, observing, okay, when I was young, I was trained for this purpose because I need to do the job. I was trained. I need to become a leader in the military. So officer, I need to be observing. So whenever I got into a strange setting, I will observe first. But now I'm a little bit older, so I don't think that is necessary for me to keep this high sense of insecurity, right? But when I worked in Washington, D.C., I was very observing. I worked in Washington, D.C. for 3 years. When I stayed there, I knew there were a lot of dangers out there. So whenever I got into a cafeteria, a restaurant, when I have a lunch meeting with a contact, and I got into there, normally I will look around, not really look around. My eyes just look around to identify who are the people from the FBI. Really, I can know who is the FBI guys. Really, because the FBI always sitting in a very, very dark corner and facing the door entrance, and dressed formal. Typical FBI guys. It's kind of interesting. But nowadays, it's kind of just a past story. But it's kind of interesting. So observing, if you are trained for this purpose, you will know that it's very easy to understand. Okay? And whether calculation from individual is not a realistic option. When does this happen? For example, if you want to survey, if you want to investigate the livelihood of a prostitute, no, it's not a very present topic for you to study, right? But they still have their lives, right? But can you just go there to ask, hey, how you feel about your life? Do you sense any threats from the mob, the gangster on the streets? Any member of the mafia contact you, control you? Have you observed, did you take any drugs, cocaine? Or can you just simply ask? No, of course, right? So it may be useful for you just to observe. But here comes the question. How can you observe without being noticed? Cause and effect, remember? Right? You want to observe, and you don't want to be identified. So observation indeed requires a lot of techniques, skills. You need to be trained. You need to be trained for this purpose. Okay? So just open the door for you to think. Any question? Let's move on the process. It's very similar. The logical process is very similar to all kinds of research data collection method, right? You need to determine the focus. Systematizing, same, focus. And design a system of data collection. You design a research tool, right, instrument. And you need to have some kind of recording sheets or checklist, observation tables, or observation checkbox. Sort of something for you to observe it, basically. So this is a tool, right? And you need to make sure that all of the observation process is systematic. So you need to have observation guidelines. Of course, for example, if I want to observe, I want to know whether you have paid attention to this class or not, right? So I will ask some of the secret tiers there to prepare. I need to prepare an observation checklist for them. But I need to make sure that the observation process is following the protocol, right? So I would give them, her or him, an observation guide, the process. I would have, for example, in this kind of guideline may include the timing for one round of observation. I will ask her, and she is required to observe each of the students during 20 minutes for the first round. Another 20 minutes, another round. Starting from here to there, one round, and take a rest for 5 minutes, and then another round. So this always called as observation guides. And observation needs to have focus, right? So if I want to identify your pattern of paying attention, what would be the paying attention patterns? I have to describe it, okay? Like a knockhead all the time, okay, fixed eyesight, and of course not playing the cell phone, right? This is not paying attention, right? 你懂事吗? This is not paying attention. You too. Okay, so not paying attention. I can observe, right? So, and there should be some field notes. Why do we need to have field notes? You need to put some annotations out there. What happened to this? You observe this. You can take some mark of there. You need to select size, select observers, train observers, and time your observation approximately. So all the process here, just give you a general idea. When you want to conduct a data collection, in terms here is observation. You need to have a tool, research tool, right? Research instrument. And you need to have a process of carrying out the research instrument for you to collect data. That's it. Very simple. Very simple. Okay? When you need it, read more literature by yourself. Okay, document review. This part, documents, is the most, I would say, the most economically efficient way for data collection. Most likely, you don't have to spend too much money, especially for poor students like us, right? It's quite doable. It's quite doable. There are so many archives there available for you to retrieve data freely. Of course, some of them does cost you some dimes, but still it's affordable. Just like me, when I was a poor doctoral student, that's why I choose document retrievement. My study focused on the U.S. One China policy. There are many different approaches of data collection I can use. I can interview. I could interview those experts in international relationship, those China experts in Washington, D.C., right? In Los Angeles. and I could dispatch a questionnaire to all the experts in the whole world. But those methods cost money, a lot of money, really a lot. Thinking about this, one round trip to Washington D.C. from Pittsburgh to D.C. money. Sending out the questions to the experts, money. I need those money. I need that kind of money for my family instead of sending out this. So that's why I choose documents. And documents are free. Were free at that time, right? At least for me, because our school, University of Pittsburgh, had that time, just like Windsor, we had a very large archive of digital archive up there. So I can go there and I can just collect data from there. Simple, free. Okay. I can do this at my home, free. So document. So you have to pay attention to this. If you are poor and you don't want to spend too much money, more than let's say 2,000, then documents may be good. Because if you want to do survey, you need to send out some hard copy, right? Printing costs you money. And administering those surveys takes some time and money. But documents, free, most likely. Okay, so basically, document review is a way of collecting data by reviewing existing documents. The documents are there, so you just go there and take it back, feel happy, analyze it. And those documents maybe come out from internal to a program, organization, or external. What is that? For example, just as I say, if you want to identify, investigate, conduct a case study on company XYZ, and you need to take all the relevant data from this case, right? So documents may be the minimum. You need to collect the minutes. They have a meeting, they have a records, right? Meeting minutes. Then you have to take them back. Of course, you have to acquire the access to those records first. But it's cheap, it's there. Memos of communications, email communications, if they allow you to take this, right? Of course, you have to access. But it will be much better, much cheaper instead of interviewing. Of course, when we conduct case study, be careful. Case study does require a multiple source of data. You cannot just evaluate your case on documents only. Well, case to case. But most likely we will expect you more out of this, okay? If it's possible, you still need to collect primary data through observation, survey, or interview. That's it. And maybe you want to collect hard copies or electronic data. And nowadays, we count on hard or electronic data most likely, right? If you want to, for example, if you are collecting newspapers, then you can just go on the newspaper website to subscribe and download it. Or you can go to Windsor Library, digital library. There's a Nexus one, then you can just retrieve all the documents, newspapers out there. So it's very useful. And reports, program logs, performance ratings, funding proposals, meeting minutes, newsletters, and marketing materials. All of this are important for you to identify what happened to the specific organizations. So you need them for you to review, right? Okay, so now is a very good time for us to, once again, to tell the difference between literature and data. Documents, remember, documents themselves can be literature or data. All depend on the different functions of those documents. So which means that a piece of document can be a literature or a piece of data. The difference between their role is depending on their function in your research. So what is the function for literature? What is the function for data? Anyone here? No? Yes.
Literature. I think it's helping you to establish your theoretical background.
Yeah, it's close and continue.
And then helping you to understand, no, helping you to set up the conceptual framework.
Yes, very close. Again, continue.
And then
What about data?
data, you pick the parts that you need to analyze, use it as decision level for your own findings, right?
Oh, the later statement is kind of confusing. But basically, literature is something for you to learn. When you conduct your research, there are many things, many issues you do not have any idea at all, right? For example, what is the theory of my study issue? I have no idea. So you go to study. You learn. The target for you to learn is literature. Wow, hold on. What is the conceptual framework of this? I have no idea. You learn. So you go to read another set of literature, right? Okay. Wow, Daniel said that I need to have a case study. Wow, what is the approach to conduct a case study? I have no idea. You learn. Oh, statistical analysis. I have no idea. You learn. So everything you need to learn, you need to have a set of literature for you. Literature can be in many different forms, right? In general, they are all documents. True. Is that right? So basically, in a study, you need literature to help you to learn all the subject knowledge that you need to equip yourself. All the knowledge before you can claim that you want to conduct the study. So everything you learn is from literature. And I guarantee you, when you really conduct your GP, you really need to learn a lot. So that in very simple translation, you need to study a lot, review a lot of literature, right? Okay, now literature, the function of literature is to help you to learn all the issues throughout the research, including how to conduct the analysis, including how to analyze qualitative data, including how to report your writing, right? All of these things do require a substantial set of knowledge, or otherwise you don't know how to write. You don't know how to analyze, right? So these are the knowledge. So literature functions are mechanisms for you to learn. But how about data? Data is the target for your analysis. You collect data and then you use data to analyze the data to answer your research questions. So anything that you analyze is your data. You use the knowledge learned from literature to analyze the data. Okay? So they are different in their major function is very clear. Literature is help you to learn. Data is for you to analyze. So imagine this. You can easily understand the format of literature and data may be very similar, but they have a very different functions from themselves. Okay? So be careful of this one. And it's very important. It's very important to take this kind of difference, to notice the difference. Or otherwise you will confuse yourself. For example, if you want to study, let's say we have a very simple research topic. My purpose of study is to identify the Wenzhou students' perception toward environmental protection, right? Look here. A novice, an amateur researcher will include this kind of research questions into his proposal, such as, what is environmental protection? Do you think that this is a feasible research questions? No. This is the basic knowledge you need to know, right? So you need to review in the literature. What is environmental protection? What is Wenzhou students' profile? This looked like a research question, but it is not. Students will argue, of course, I need to study, so I know, only after study I will know the answer for what is the profile of Wenzhou students, right? But this is not the case. These are the fundamental knowledges you need for you to conduct the research. So at least you have to review literature about environmental protection, Wenzhou students' profile, why Wenzhou student is unique in this study, and so on, right? And what will be the data in this case? If you are using a survey, then the responses in the survey are the data for you to do analysis. So they are the responses. They are data. Anything else you read so that you can conduct the study is literature. Okay? They are different. Maybe very, very different. Okay, let's have a 10 minutes break. So basically, we have to make a distinction between literature and data. They serve different functions. And literature is for us to learn, for everything that we need to conduct our research. And data is the target for us to analyze, so that we can use the findings from the data to address our research purpose. Okay, so they are very clearly different. And when to use document to review? You can use this to provide yourself background information or to determine if implementation of program reflects program plans. This is called as program evaluation. Basically, program evaluation, we need to compare the performance, the output of the program to the original plan. For example, in the plan we have a certain targets. And by the end of the after the implementation of the program, we should have some results. So basically, the simplest form of evaluation, the success of the program is to compare the results with the target, whether they are the same. If it is not, there must be some reasons, right? Okay, so it's very simple. Or when you need information to help to develop other data collection tools for your research, there's another kind of document to review purpose for you to develop. Basically, this is some sort of literature review. Some sort of literature review. Or when you need data to answer what and how many research questions, what or how, the process, what it is, general description of the variables, or the process of conducting something. So basically, documents are available for you to understand the general pictures, or for you to identify for example, the trend of some certain developments and so on. Or in the previous years, students have used document to review content analysis to compare different ideologies from the different newspapers, or to identify the public opinions on certain issues, or used to identify the so-called transitional justice in Taiwan by examining documents from different eras. So it's kind of quite widely used, and it is very, very inexpensive. So that's good. So these are the occasions for you. And what is the process for document reviews? Well, basically you have to access existing documents. And as we know, there are some you can access this from our Wenzhou library, or you can access those documents from, if you want to have journal articles, you can, we have a free library called Z Library, right? You know that? Z Library, or Hui is the Sci-Hub. Hui is Sci-Hub. Every time you want to identify this website, you need to type in where is Sci-Hub, because the link, the website is always changing its site because it is illegal, of course. And Z Library, you can find it. You may need to register to become a member of these two websites so they can fully utilize all the articles provided that. Okay. These websites are working with free donations from many different scholars in the whole wide world. They provided their ID and password to their own secret archives, so allow you to retrieve the different files, different documents from different libraries, different digital archives. Once a copy of a certain file is retrieved, then that file will be stored in either of the two websites there. So you don't have to, the website owner does not need to repeat the process of using ID and password. So it's very convenient. So it's very useful and it's free. So get it, take it. And you can, once you have the existing documents, you make sure about that. And the second issue, you access where the document is, right? The second important issue is the accessibility. It's very important for you to acquire the accessibility. And there are many different ways to retrieve documents from different websites, right? For example, if you want to retrieve articles, news articles from, let's say, China Times. China Times does not offer you a full-fledged data bank over there. So you have to use a lot of skill. And if you want to retrieve news articles from the United Daily News, they offer a data bank for you, but with fee, of course. So you need to pay. You need to subscribe. How about Liberty Times? Well, they don't have. But so you have to be artistic enough to use different skills to retrieve all the data from Google website. So it's kind of tricky, a little bit tricky. And there are some commercial available websites there. They offer a full-blown or full-scale news articles there, like the one I just mentioned. Next one, Nexus One, or other Xinwen Wang. You can do that. It's many different ways. And sometimes, for example, if you want to retrieve, let's say you want to compare the official positions between US and China. So when you talk about official positions, of course you need to go to Chinese State Department website. You need to go to US State Department, right? And how are you going to retrieve data from their websites? Their algorithm of giving out data is different. Is that right? So you need to design keywords. You need to design the process of retrieving the data, and with different. So you have to, of course, first you have to evaluate the accessibility of these two websites. And with the different kind of website, you design different algorithm, different formula to retrieve data. And it's kind of fascinating. Once you get into, you will know that, wow, there are so many differences out there. And it's fine. Sometimes it will be very difficult to retrieve data from Chinese website. Sometimes, very difficult. They will cut it off automatically. Where is my data? So it does not give you all anything. There's a certain threshold out there. So it so basically, data is something. Data accessibility is another issue. You know you could have data from there, right? But the accessibility is more important than this. If you do not have the access to the data, then there's no way for you to get the data. No documents for you. So you have to forgo this one. And also you have to ensure confidentiality. Some data is very secret, with a secret level up there, right? So you want to make sure that the use of the data is safe only to the persons who need to know. So it's somewhat different. But be careful about using government data. Be careful about this. Because government data have different level of confidentiality issues. You don't want to abuse that. So most likely it will be much safer for you to use open source. Open source. Okay, anything that's open is good. But everything is confidential. There's a risk. There's a risk about that. Okay? And you need to compile the documents only relevant to your research. Just like my research, my doctoral dissertation, I retrieved the data around 40,000 pieces of articles from various websites. Then I have to personally review all the data to determine whether they are related to government, Taiwanese government. So by the end of, after I browsed the 40,000 or so number of articles, I kept around 3,000 pieces of articles. They are relevant to Taiwanese government at that time. So you have to keep them, compile them together. So basically, content analysis based on documents, it's cheap, but it takes a lot of time. You will hate it when you do this job through the process. Really, it takes a lot of time, more than you can imagine, indeed, more than you can imagine. And also, you have to understand how and why the documents were produced. For example, I just say that I want to compare the official positions between China and the United States, right? So the most authoritative sources for the official position must come out from the State Department on the two nations, right? But I need to understand, I need to justify how and why the documents have produced. Because every document from one certain website serves some purpose. Whether there's ideology, whether it is for propaganda. Propaganda is something, right? I give you the documents on the official website, but it's just for you to know, for you to feel happy, propaganda. So you have to be careful about this. Be careful about this. Some websites are full of ideological bias. So they will give you a lot of comments, targeting at some certain people, some certain organization, right? Like a women hater group or men hater group. If you explore, if you receive articles from those websites, you will understand all of the hatchet comments that will come out from this website. You have to know that. Okay, so be careful. You have to access, you have to understand how, and you have to explain. You have to describe, so that your readers, especially, it's very important for qualitative research. It's your responsibility to let your readers to know the nature of your data. It's very important. Or otherwise, they cannot have a full, comprehensive understanding about your data analysis. Okay, it's very important. And also, you have to determine the accuracy of the documents. This one is very important. Sometimes you will hear some professor would advise you not to cite from Wikipedia. Not to cite. It can be a reference, but never cite. Never put a citation there, hey, this is from Wikipedia. Because, first, the contents of Wikipedia are created by many unknown people out there. Even the kindergartner can write something over there, if he knows, right? So remember, don't cite. It can give you some references. And also, the articles in Wikipedia are used for propaganda purpose sometimes. They just want you to feel good. So they will produce the context for you, right? So you have to be careful about this. And also, if you are conducting literature review by using documents from websites, right, that is a very tricky business. Tricky business. I ever observed some students using blogs from the teenage groups as the basic for their literature review. So strange. Those teens, well, they are human, right? I agree, right? But they really have no idea about what they are talking about. Really. And there's a citation there to some blog. Yes, I agree that this student has dutifully follow all the protocol citation, right? I take but basically, it's not accurate. It's not accurate. It's not just something some complaints, some grudge from a group of teenagers, and you count on that as your part of your literature review. Strange, okay? And you need to, overall, you need to summarize the information from documents reviews, right? Okay, so document review can be used for literature review and also can be used for content analysis. It's all up to you to determine the function of those documents. Okay, so documents have many different forms. Using documents for your study can be very, very economic efficient, of course. But in terms of the time, in terms of efforts you need to put on, may not be the case. It's a matter of trade-off. You use your time to save some of your money. That's it. Okay, so be careful with this. So basically today we talk about two different general paradigms of data collection, quantitative methods and qualitative methods, right? And the quantitative methods we use interview with structured questions or survey with structured close-ended questions to collect items, to collect answers from the respondents. It's good because our purpose is to transform them into numbers so we can use statistical analysis to produce some understanding about the phenomena, some findings. And of course, on the other side, we can use qualitative data collection methods. Qualitative data, and the method for collecting those data can be through observation, survey, or not survey, interview, or documents, many different kinds. And don't take light of the documents. Although it is efficient, it is economical, it requires a lot of time. And content analysis based on documents, you will be amazed to find out there are many different ways of analysis can be used on content analysis, not only qualitative analysis. You can use contents and code them into numbers and to perform statistical analysis. Contents. It's amazing, right? So throughout the process of your learning, you will understand there are a lot of possibilities out there. If you have provided a logical process for your data analysis and you find that this is doable, then that would be doable. And that would be interesting enough for you to do. Okay? Okay, and the last slide here. Next week we will talk about processing data. Data, after you collect data, you need to edit it. You need to code it, right? And different paradigms, qualitative research and quantitative, have different ways of editing and coding. They have a different idea. However, the process is about the same. The logical process is about the same. We don't use raw data for analysis. Again, you don't use raw data for analysis. You need to edit the data. And after you edit data, you need to code the data. So basically, when we say we are analyzing the data, we are analyzing the codes to some extent, not the data, raw data, not really the raw data. So the first step for us is to look at the codes, but not the data itself. So be careful, okay? So don't do this. For example, I observed some students, they always claim that I have collected, for example, in qualitative research, I have collected 1,000 pieces of data. Ooh, that's amazing, right? 1,000 pieces of journal articles or some sort of documents. Wow, that's good. But throughout her analysis, only appear 3 or 4 articles. Strange, right? You say you have 1,000, but why you only focus on the analysis 3 or 4? It happens a lot. Happens a lot. So what's wrong with the data analysis? Because this young lady does not have the idea about the proper process for data analysis. Okay, later you will learn one by one. Okay, so now, your research portfolio 11. So when collecting the data for your proposed GP, now it's a good time for you to think. There may be some proper methods for data collection for you. So if you are conducting a case study, look at yourself. Do you need to have documents from the company? Do you need to interview interview the statements from the CEOs or the managers. Do you need to observe the daily operations? Maybe, right? Do you need to dispatch questionnaires so that you have a survey? Maybe determine that. Okay? If you want to, for example, if you are interested in identify a very small cultural setting, such as cosplayers. Oh, I saw some cosplayer that last Saturday in Yancheng. They were unique. Did you go there? Anyone there? They dress up like a chicken, like a humblebee, like a Superman, with a knife. And with a knife, one lady dressed up looked like a 少女白情. So funny. Really, 少女白情, no? Does that look good? My wife and I exchanged comments. I said, look at that, she is a 实验文. My wife said, no, look like more than the 少女白情. Right? So it's kind of a different cultural setting, right? So if you get in there, you will find out there are so many things for you to explore. Now it's your turn to think of it. When you decide to collect your data for your proposed GPU, what are the issues you need to consider? This is a very open-ended question. You may go through this one, try to identify some. And basically, you have to think about several issues. One, the data. What is the data you need to collect? Let me say that one more time. Basically, you need to answer three very, very basic questions. That is, first one, the data. What is the data? And where is the data? Okay, this is the first set of consideration. It's very important because you need to have data, right? But what is your data? Your data come out from your study population. Okay, so where is the data? Of course, it's in the study population. But how can you access the data? Accessibility. So think about this. It's open-ended, but you need to focus on the data and what it is the data and where is the data. Number two is about data collection. Then you have to ask, what is your research instrument? You need to collect data. And the second one is the process of using the research instrument to collect data. Okay, basically, the second consideration is about data collection. But before you can collect data, you need to have a research instrument, right? Okay, so what kind of research instrument you need? In your case, if you need to have multiple sources of data, but through survey and interview, then you need to have a questionnaire. You need to have an interview schedule, right? So there are two sets of research instruments. Of course, the construct of the research instruments are all the same. You need to have a study issue, study population, right? Different form. But once you have a research instrument, you need to use it to collect your data. So what is the process you need to do? Think about this process, okay? And number three, which we are going to talk about next time. So you don't have to do this. So the only thing you need to do is these two for now. What are these when collecting the data? So basically you have to describe 1 and 2. Data, what is your data? Where is your data? Second part is about data collection. What is your research instrument? How are you going to use your research instrument to collect data, right? And next week, we are going to talk about processing data. This is number 3. Number 3 is about data analysis. The way of your data analysis. Look here. By finishing this, you should have a set of data available for you to do data analysis, right? Then, number 3, you have to think over What will be the process for your data analysis? When we analyze data, basically it has three major parts. First part is editing. How you are going to edit your data. The second part is how are you going to code your data, coding. And the third part is about analysis. How are you going to analyze your data? So basically, over here about data, we have three major category you have to think of. The first one is about data itself. What is the data? Who is the data, right? The second part is you identify the data. You need to collect them. So you have to tell me what is your research instrument. How are you going to use the research instrument to collect data? So you have to describe number two, right? So once you have dutifully fulfill your job in collecting data with the process you described in number two, then you should have a set of data. Number three, you have to tell me how are you going to deal with your data. Okay, so you have to describe the editing process, the coding process, and then eventually the analysis on the data. Okay, so basically this is what you need to put in chapter 4 or chapter 3. Chapter 3 research methodology. Research methodology. Chapter 3. You have to describe that. Okay, read. So in general, there are only three parts. Okay, any question? And after we finalized the assignment for the arrangement for the advisor and advisee, you will receive a mail. And also after that, you should receive another mail about the final portfolio, what you need to do to fulfill your final assignments. And also we have a final meeting, so final examination for you. We are approaching to the end of the semester, hooray, no problem. So great, and after that we will have our new year. And after that we'll come back again to our GP start. Great. Okay, what do you think? Good day? Okay, if that's a good day, we'll call it a day for now and I go to have some lunch. 20 minutes before I need to get ready for our assignments. Okay, see you next time and good luck. Be happy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.